A blind monster in Scotland chasing a victim whose feet are being tickled by ants, a secret medieval passage in a modern school, and a couple of werewolves making the squishy. Today's episode is less about believability and more about enjoying some well-written, especially scary and/or straight-up weird stories folks have sent me. The first story is one of the best I've read in a while, and I'm adding it to my list of stories that might have actually spooked me. Surprisingly enough, all of these stories were labeled as allegedly true by the folks who sent them on my website, but don't worry about trying to believe them. Just enjoy the weirdness, the scariness, and the squish. The comment of the day comes from my previous episode titled 3 Real Monsters Seen in Oklahoma. A viewer by the username of Jesse Bakken says, "Another real monster seen in Oklahoma, Joe Exotic." My reply? Guys, I had to look up who this guy is, and at this point all I know is he's the tiger guy from the Netflix series Tiger King. Is this or isn't this a rabbit hole my wife and I should go down? Let me know. Leave an interesting comment on today's video and I might reply to it in a future episode. Now, let's begin. Hiding from a blind monster. From SkepticNoMore. I live in Scotland, UK. I won't say exactly where, but it's pretty rural. I've lived here my whole life and never spent more than my uni years away. A born and raised Highland country girl for 29 years and counting. I'd never had any spooky supernatural experiences or creepy ghost stories, as my username suggests. I wasn't a believer in any of that. I'm no stranger to the woods or the glens. I camp, hike, and swim in nature for fun. Even when I'm at home, I like to chill out on the porch on my phone. I've always felt so comfortable with nature. I suppose it helps knowing that the UK has no especially dangerous animals, and the fact I live a good jaunt away from even the smallest town. So no people to worry about either. It was completely private and secluded, just how I like it. But a few days ago, as of writing this, I had an encounter, and honestly, I'm not really sure what happened. I've told a few close friends, one of which encouraged me to submit my story here. She says it'll help me come to terms with it. I hope she's right. Here goes. Despite these stereotypes about the Scottish Highlands, we do actually get summer here. It can get really hot and sunny on the right day. It was that sort of day, and I figured I'd go to the small lake about 40 minutes from my house and take a dip. The walk there was just like every other time. Woods, field, hill, more woods than a clearing and the lake. It's my little slice of heaven. It's so beautiful. The water trickles down from higher up, so it's really clear. Honestly, it looks like something out of a fancy commercial. I threw off my clothes just down to my swimming suit and jumped in. The lake is about the width of an average canal, for reference, and deep enough that I can only just touch the bottom on my tiptoes. Though granted, I'm not the tallest lass. I swam for a while and just enjoyed cooling off. For the record, it was about 11:30 in the morning, and that's when the first weird thing happened. A loud ruckus in the bushes made me jump, as, all of a sudden, 3 deer came tearing through, jumping through a shallower part of the water, and off into the other side of the woods, the way I'd come up from. Now this was really strange. I'm not quiet when I swim. I splash around and typically sing to myself if I'm in the mood, and I was. The deer around here aren't used to humans, so they avoid coming anywhere near you. I'd only ever seen a few from miles away through my whole life. So for them to run towards my noisy self without even giving me a glance was really off. In hindsight, I know now why they were running so blindly, but we'll get to that. I was a little uneasy after that. I knew that, rationally, they were probably just in season or something, but it didn't sit right with me. After a few more minutes, I got out of the water and decided I'd walk back home. Usually, I towel off by the river, get redressed, and then head off. But this time I just didn't want to hang around there any longer than I already had. I threw on my shirt and trousers as quickly as I could, and I made a move back down the way I'd come, the way the deer had gone. And yes, I was still soaking wet. I figured the warm weather would dry me off, but I'd made one really stupid mistake. Thanks to not wanting to faff around, trying the laces, I'd left my boots in my bag and opted to walk home barefoot. Heading back through the woods seemed very strange. Birds were very vocal, bugs were buzzing like mad, and I kept catching glimpses of wild rabbits. Everything was heading away, downwards, downwind, and in quite a hurry, just like the deer had been. I was getting more and more freaked out, which is very out of character for me. I'd picked up my pace from a casual walk to just shy of a jog. I found myself looking around frantically, as if I was trying to spot something, though I had no idea what. I can't say I had some feeling of being watched or stalked. It just felt as if I was unwelcome, in the wrong place kind of thing. Thanks to the animals going nuts, mainly the birds up in the branches, I couldn't hear much of anything else. That's why it took me so off guard. I was looking around like I'd been for nearly 10 minutes, but this time, as I swung my eyes to the right, I saw something new. I saw a figure quite clearly. It was keeping pace with me, shadowing me, staring straight at me. I'm still not 100% sure what it looked like. It was very slender, had a thin layer of stark white hair, and moved with a smooth but loping manner. I know its head was turned to face me, but as strange as it sounds, I have no clue what its face looked like. It was like when I saw it, my eyes just slipped off of it, as if I instinctively averted my gaze to the trees and bushes. My heart skipped a beat, and I almost tripped over myself in sheer shock. I can't quite remember my thought process, but it was something along the lines of, "What is that? How long has it been keeping up with me? What does it want? What should I do?" All at once, some trees came between me and the thing I'd glimpsed, and I just stopped dead. Every fiber of my body was screaming like alarm bells that I was in danger, but I was not to run. I don't know why, but my immediate thought was to climb the nearest tree and take it from there. In equal measure, I both wanted to see it again to figure out what the heck it was, but also not to set my eyes on it again. My whole body was shaken to the core. I felt sick and dizzy, trying to wrap my head around it. As strange as it sounds, when I'd seen it for that split second, I felt offended, like subconsciously deep down, I was genuinely disgusted that this thing was there, that it actually existed. So close I could see the bushes being pushed down as it clambered through them. My messed up state aside, I made it up the tree and tried to catch my breath on a decently large branch. I had to sit on the larger part and balance myself by using my feet to press against the other part of the trunk. It was one of those trees that grows into a kind of Y shape. For a few moments I sat there, slowly scanning the forest floor below, looking for anything. It was dead silent now. All the freaked out animals had booked it far away. It was just me, my tree, my pounding heart, and the consuming fear that it was still around. I didn't know if I just hadn't heard it approach because of the birds or if it was just that silent. The idea only made me feel even more queasy. After what felt like ages, I spotted the slightest rustle in a patch of bushes, and then I heard it. Breathing. Or maybe sniffing. It was dog-like, but very quiet. It almost seemed to be coming from all around me. Then the bushes rustled again, and it stopped. I was petrified, staying as still as I could, desperately listening for anything at all, stuck in that darned tree. Now, this is where my haste in leaving the river came back to mess with me. I felt something on my right foot, something small, barely even noticeable at first. But then another, and more, like tiny little touches, super light but moving. I tilted my head to see, only to realize the cause. It was ants, tiny black specks pouring out of little holes in the bark and towards my feet. Thankfully, the ants here in the UK don't tend to be the biting or stinging sort. I almost wish they would have been, in retrospect. It would have been easier to ignore. No, these little guys did something far worse. They tickled. At first, they were only just noticeable, but as more and more climbed onto my feet, it quickly became unbearable. You'd think when you're scared to death, you'd be able to ignore something so silly. Heck, normally I'm not even a ticklish person, but my senses were heightened to the max, paranoid about this thing that was still down in the woods somewhere. Just as I was going to pull my feet away and relocate how I was sitting, I saw it again. It just strolled out brazenly into the open. It held its head high, sniffing the air again. My eyes tried to move off of it from sheer reflex, but this time I forced myself to look at it. It was huge. Even hunched over, it stood taller than anyone I'd ever met, long bony arms resting on the ground like a gorilla, a visible spine pushing against the patchy white fur. Its face, though, I've never seen anything like it. I can't even think of an animal to compare it to. I guess the best comparison I could say would be like a very, and I mean very, malnourished cow. It had no horns and large pointed ears like a canine, but the facial structure was just pure disfigurement. That's when I noticed several things all at once. Its mouth was slightly open, drooling and lined with mismatched, jagged teeth. Its nostrils were bloodied, with one completely collapsed, and finally it was looking straight at me. Here's the thing, though. It was blind. It had these sickly, pus-filled, milky eyes. It was looking straight at me, sniffing, but had no idea I was a few meters away. I could have spat and probably hit it. I tried to stay as still as humanly possible, staring at this abomination. The ants, however, had different plans. When I say they were covering my feet, I mean it. I was having to balance myself by pressing just my toes against the bark. Like I said earlier, I'm not a tall girl, and this meant they were all over the undersides of my poor feet. I couldn't even move a hand to cover my mouth with how I was balancing. It was insane. I was staring down at this completely unnatural thing, and all I could do was try not to giggle. I tried to move one foot away, but the second I so much as knocked a leafy branch, the creature's ears twitched, and its head snapped to where the sound had come from. Putting my foot back, however, only seemed to shake the bark and caused even more ants to come exploring. The creature was coming closer, slowly walking towards the tree, sniffing so loudly it was almost wheezing. It reached the bottom of the tree and lifted its head up. Then came its first arm. It was so long, it almost reached where I was immediately. I saw its hand, a gnarled mess of curved claws jutting out of knuckles, almost like that of a sloth. Its claws sunk into the bark like it was nothing. Then it reared up, and from what I could tell, prepared to climb. I was weighing my options. Should I jump out of the tree and make a run for it? There was no way I'd outrun this thing, and from this high up, I'd probably break my ankle. Then I'd really be done for. My other option seemed to be staying still and hoping it would somehow miss me. But I knew from so close it would likely manage to get my scent. Then, ever present were my little tormentors. Just as I thought I was going to either pass out or let a few giggles slip past my trembling lips, something no short of a miracle happened. In the distance, a sound rang out. It was quiet, but in such silence it could still be heard. It was a car door slamming shut. The creature's whole body twisted, and it tore off into the woods at a terrifying speed. It even ripped a fist-sized hole in the tree where its claws had been. No sooner did I have the chance, I snatched my feet from the ants and covered my mouth to let out a mixture of long-repressed hysterics, both laughing and crying. I climbed down the tree with less care than I should have, cutting my palm on some of the broken bark on my way down. Once I was on Sky's ground, I shook the remaining ants off and made a beeline for home. I desperately wanted to run, but I knew I couldn't risk making a sound. Though jumpy and paranoid, I closed the distance and got out of the woods and into my house. I was even careful to shut the door quietly. After all, that slamming car door sounded like it was ages away, and my house was only about 10 minutes from where I'd just hidden from it. I haven't seen it since, though I've hardly been outside since then too. The few close friends I've told all believe me. Thankfully, they know I'm not the sort to joke about and prank people. I don't know what happened with that car, and whatever poor person was getting in or out. I hope they're okay. I also must admit that I'm kind of worried about cutting my hand on the bark. What if that thing gets my scent from it? Maybe I'm still just too shaken from it all. Just be careful in the woods. It doesn't matter what's supposed to live there. Nature doesn't play by our rules, and there are things we don't know still out there. This has cemented it for me. There really is no such thing as a safe forest. The Door, from Scarystories. There is one door at my old school before I graduated from middle school that was always locked. Not once did I see it open. There are many rumors about what lies on the other side of the door, such as an abandoned military bunker, a torture chamber, and my least favorite, yet another janitor's closet. Whenever I walked past the door, I always got this eerie feeling that I couldn't explain, but the feeling came as quickly as it disappeared. One day I was preparing to go home and about to leave school. I walked past the door, but this time I didn't have the eerie feeling I had before. I turned my eyes towards the door to examine it, and I noticed there was a slight opening in the door. Out of curiosity, I waited until no one was around. Then I stepped inside to investigate. I knew my mom wouldn't mind if I was not home right after school, because I usually go to one of my friends' houses to play video games. To this very day, what I saw in that room still makes me wish I'd ignored the door and just gone home. Inside, it was pitch black. I looked for a light switch, but there was none, so I pulled out my phone, which was only at 10% battery, and I turned on the flash. The light from my phone revealed stairs, which were carved from seemingly ancient stone bricks, the same as the walls. Curiosity struck me even harder, and I decided to walk down the stairs. As I walked down the stairs, the eerie feeling came back, and the further I went down, the stronger it became. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard a loud bang. I didn't pay much attention to it, but I wish I had. I continued walking down and finally made it to the bottom. I looked at my phone and saw I had only 5% left. It had taken me 15 minutes to walk down the stairs. I shone the light from my phone to find that the stairs had led me to a long tunnel lined with torches, with a wooden door at the end. In the corner of the tunnel, I saw a light switch. With my phone now at 4%, I turned my phone and flashlight off, then flipped the switch. The torches turned on, and light illuminated the room. I walked through the long tunnel, and as I reached the door at the end, the eerie feeling faded away. Slowly, I opened the door so that only one eye could see through. The room was so dark that the only thing I could see was a pedestal and something on the floor. Then I heard someone coming, so I opened the door and slowly closed it behind me. I ran to hide behind something in the dark. Now that I was hidden, I could see that the something on the floor seemed to be cult-like writing in red paint, or what I thought was paint. The doors opened, and two robed figures entered the room, one dragging a long black garbage bag, the other holding some sort of book. The one dragging the bag stopped dragging it and entered the darkness. The one holding the book placed it on the pedestal and yelled out,
"You got the table yet?" "Almost,"
said the other. I examined the bag and saw that there was a pale hand poking out. Out of fear, I covered my mouth and waited until the one by the pedestal was distracted. Then I silently walked to the door to escape. As I was just about to reach the door, the other robed figure that was in the shadows grabbed me.
"So there was someone in here after all,"
said the figure in a raspy voice.
"I guess so,"
said the other in a calm voice. "What are you going to do to me?" I yelled as I was trying to break free from the robed figure's grasp, but it didn't work.
"It's not us you need to worry about. It's them,"
said the one beside the pedestal in a malicious tone. The lights turned on and illuminated the room to reveal two pale, 7-foot-tall human-like creatures. They had no eyes, no ears, only an extremely long, malicious smile and a crooked nose. The robed figure released his grasp on me and went to join his ally. I tried to move and get out of there, but my body was stuck. I was paralyzed with fear. The human-like creatures began to approach me, and I fought to move my body. As I fought, I realized that while I was hiding in the darkness, I'd actually been hiding behind one of these creatures. One figure was now close enough that it stretched out its hand and nearly touched me. Before it could, I was able to break out of my paralyzed state and move. I opened the door and darted out of the room as fast as I could. I reached the stairs within seconds and looked back to see the figures running down the tunnel. I turned my head back towards the stairs and ran up quickly. I was halfway up the stairs when they let out an ear-piercing screech. I reached the top of the stairs and realized the noise I'd heard earlier was the door being closed. My heart was racing now. The door wouldn't open. I pounded on it with all my might. Behind me, I could hear the creatures quickly approaching. Right when I thought all hope was lost, the door opened and I darted out of there. I quickly closed the door shut. I turned to thank whoever opened the door, but no one was there. A week later, a lot of the staff and students were appearing to go missing, so the cops searched the school. When they opened the door and checked that room, nothing was there, save for a letter on the pedestal saying,
"We will find you, kid."
Later that week, it was revealed that the door could have only been opened from the outside. That made me wonder, how exactly did the door open? Because there was no one on the other side that could have opened it for me. A couple of years have passed now. I've decided to write this to document what happened to me because I think they've found me. For the past week, I've been sleeping with a 6-inch knife under my pillow because I've been seeing these creatures late at night in my room, hunched over my bed, maliciously smiling. I don't know how long I have left before they take me, but I won't go without a fight. The following story comes from an older episode, but it's one of the most hilarious stories I've ever been sent, so enjoy. This is I Walked In on Two Werewolves Mating, from PoetikDom. As I drove along the highway, I'd seemed to have taken a wrong turn. The old GPS my father had given me was basically flipping me off at this point, and my cell had about 4% battery. I pulled into a nearby rest stop so as to not get further lost. I needed to see where on earth I was. The sun was gently dipping behind the very dense forest just behind the building. I went inside to relieve myself, and thankfully there was actually a roll of toilet paper there. After my personal business concluded, I washed my hands and headed back to my car. I opened the door, and suddenly I heard noises coming from the forest. These noises were strange. Breathing, heavy breathing, very heavy breathing. I guess panting would be more accurate. The sound was quite familiar. I thought, wow, with a smirk. There's really someone out there getting it on, right in the middle of the woods. I stood still for a minute to acclimate my eyes to the darkness. I creeped closer very slowly, but the closer I got, the more I thought, that doesn't sound like people. This panting was very guttural, primal. About 20 yards later, I began to make shapes out, forms. Then I backed up a few yards, swallowing hard and wondering if this was a good idea. I pulled up my phone and unlocked it. I decided maybe I should find a night vision app. The best one I could find at the time was $9.99. That was expensive for an app. Oh well. I could have quite the story to tell and pictures to share if I could snap a photo of these weird animals going at it. Maybe they're bears or something. Might even be able to sell the photograph to some nature magazine, but maybe that's wishful thinking. I downloaded and opened the app. I pointed it at the forms I could see as stealthily as possible. I inched forward, and I could not believe my eyes. I was quite impressed with the app, first of all. It was quite a difference from my normal camera. I thought the app would just be a scam. I assumed that night vision was a thing that had to be built in the hardware, but whatever this software was doing, it was a really good job. But before me, there were two animals. But they were unlike any animals I'd ever seen. One of them was on all fours. It had dark, silvery gray fur, but seeing fur on a figure that had a feminine shape, it was quite bizarre. Because I swear there were bumps signaling female anatomy. It was like the perfect blend of human and some furry mammal features. Features that resembled a wolf. There were paws where hands and feet should have been, adorned with large claws. And behind the female stood a male, claws firmly gripping onto her haunches. This male was at least 7 feet tall and probably 450 pounds. It was rock-solid muscle, covered with a blacker than black fur. Then he howled or screamed some nightmarish sound, feral and textured. Before I could take pictures, I was so terrified from the sound that I ducked down. I began to crawl back to my vehicle, horrified that these things might see me. Some animals can be far more aggressive during mating. Halfway back to the vehicle, like an idiot, I stepped on a fallen branch. I quickly looked back at the two forms. They were now facing me, both in the same stance now, and I couldn't help but feel they were looking at me like a fat kid eyeing some whopper. I sprinted back to the car, opened the door, jumped in, and slammed the door shut. A second after I did that, a loud thud came from my roof. Both of them had jumped on it, and from both sides a head peeked in from the car windows. I slipped the key in and started the engine, flooring it out of there as quickly as I could. I did not stop until I reached the end of my road. To make sure I wasn't followed, I cracked my window and took a picture of the car roof first. Nothing was there. They hadn't latched on, and a picture of the surrounding area showed that I hadn't been followed either. That was a crazy night.